water content, fluid spacing, and electrolyte values, normal values for electrolyte. So water content, let's start off there. If you're following along with our book, it's chapter 17 in our adult health med-surg. But water content in general, the more fat you have, the less water you have. The less fat you have, the more water you have. So in comparison, somebody that might be obese is going to have less water. Somebody with more lean muscle mass is going to have more water. Now, the only way that this doesn't apply is that in infants, excuse me, they're made up of almost 80% water. So as you get older, what do? You lose muscle mass and you gain fat. Therefore, you have less water in your body. And again, it doesn't apply to infants, but other than that, you can pretty much use it across the board. Men in general have more lean muscle mass than women. Therefore, they have more water content than women do. So 50 to 60% of your body is made up of water. In the older populations, you might find that 45 to 55% of your body is made up of water. So this water is not just floating around randomly in your body. They are different types of compartments or fluid compartments. Now, in general, intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid are the two ways that we categorize this. Intracellular means it's inside the cell. Too easy. Here's our red blood cell. He's got fluid inside of his cell, and that makes it intracellular. Anything outside of the cell is extracellular fluid. Now, this is where I got a little bit confused myself, but basically, if it's not inside the cell, it's considered extracellular fluid. Now, you have intravascular fluid, which is not inside the cell, but it is inside of a vascular space, so it's called intravascular fluid. Intravascular fluid is in your veins, your capillaries, anything that's vascular. Again, vascular, blood, think inside of your veins, okay? In this picture, it's inside of your heart, and it's intravascular fluid. You also have transversal fluid, that is your specialized fluid. You have it in spinal cord, your brain, things of that nature. So it's specialized compartments of fluid, which is also considered extracellular fluid. All right, so somewhere in between there comes this interstitial fluid, which is a little bit complex to initially grasp. I was a little confused about it myself, but it's outside of the cell, so it is extracellular. But basically, it comes down to, how do I get fluid from this vascular space, from the heart into, let's say, your artery? How do I get it from this space right here, your intravascular space, to that cell that's really far away? All right, it doesn't have a capillary linking to it, so it can't get it from there. How do I get that fluid there? Well, the answer is intracellular. All right, it is in between that intravascular space and where that red blood cell is, way over here, somewhere off in the last layer of your skin or something of that nature. But basically, how we get fluid from that intravascular space to a cell that's much farther away, and skin was a pretty bad example because top layer is dead anyways, but we do it through the interstitial spaces. So basically, I've represented fluid as this red line right here. Please don't confuse it with blood. It's not blood. I'm not talking about blood right now. It is fluid moving around the cells, not in the cells, around, in between the cells, to get to that very last cell on the last border of your organ or something of that nature. All right, so it's called interstitial, in between cells, interstitial. All right, that's how we're getting fluid to that far off cell. Intravascular, inside of your vessels, intracellular, inside of your cell, and interstitial, in between the cells. All right, that's how we get the fluid to all of the cells, not just one or two. Okay, so in these fluids, we're not just talking about, just random, it's not just water. We're not completely 100% made up of water. We have other things. We have electrolytes in there. All right, electrolytes are basically anything that can be dissolved in water and have a charge, all right, or an ion. So that is what an electrolyte is. Electrolytes can be positive or negative. And the way that I am using to remember that is by cations are positive. All right, so your sodium is a cation, and it's positive, and little baby kitty cats are positive things. All right, we think You know, baby kitty cats aren't normally thought of as a negative thing, even though I hate cats, but whatever. Onions. Onions are negative, all right? Most people, if you like onions, they don't like cutting them. So think about cutting the onions, all right? So onions, cashews, cat, onions, cat, onions. Onions are negative, cats are positive, okay? Again, positive, negative. So, they are either have a positive charge or a negative charge. Predominantly, and there's a lot of electrolytes, but predominantly your extracellular fluid, again, not inside the cell, is your sodium and your chloride or salt. So predominantly your extracellular fluid consists of sodium and chloride. Your intracellular fluid consists of potassium and phosphate. All right. Now the other thing that I was confused of, well, how can there be sodium out here and in here? I'm not saying that there's not sodium in your intracellular fluid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying predominantly it's in your extracellular fluid. So these are the major ones that you look at for your intra and your extracellular fluid. And I've got a little diagram down here because it helps me. Here's your red blood cell. Inside that blood cell, you've got potassium and phosphate, which is kind of wiped off there. So outside, you have sodium and you have chloride, okay, and that's in one of your intravascular spaces. Now there is a movement between these things, and we'll go into that in a later video, but those are your electrolytes. Now there is a whole bunch of other electrolytes, and it's very hard because you're trying to remember normal values for all of these electrolytes, and it gets a little bit challenging. So one video I watched said basically write it out, and that can definitely work, but another approach would be trying to make up something, a song or a picture that would go with this. And I'll show you that in a second. All right, so bicarb. Bicarb has to do with your metabolic. So when we look at our values, trying to figure out if it's respiratory acidosis or metabolic alkalosis or whatever it is, when pH is off, we're looking at this value, and it relates to metabolic, all right, in our Rome process. But here, I think of metabolism being high is when you're 22 to 26. So, you know, at 22 to 26, you don't necessarily have to work out a lot. You might have that hourglass figure. Some books say 28 as far as your higher value, but 22 to 26 is what we're going to use here. So that's the way I remember bicarb. I remember it has to do with the metabolism, and it's 22 to 26, okay? You have chloride, 96 to 106, phosphate, 2.4 to 4.4, potassium, 3.5 to 5, magnesium, 1.5 to 2.5, sodium is 135 to 145, and calcium, 8.6 to 10.2. That is a whole bunch to remember. I don't know about you, but I can only remember the bicarb right now. So how else can we remember this? All right, here's my little picture, and let's see if we can't get both of these in the screen. This is Surfer Girl. All right, she's a California Surfer Girl. And so here, we are going to look at, her name is MG, or her name's Maggie, but because she wants to be cool, she's going by MG for short. And she has this beautiful hourglass figure, if you don't see, because she's 22, 26 years of age. And she loves to surf. So she goes to the ocean, which of course is salt. She goes to the ocean, and she spends roughly about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours in the ocean, okay? So think sodium, 1.5 to 2.5 hours, all right? So Maggie, who is really, really loves the ocean, spends 1.5 to 2.5 hours in the ocean, sodium. She always packs lunch with her, and about 1:35 to 1:45, she takes lunch. All right, so that's where she's like, okay, I'm gonna take a break for a second, and I'm gonna go get some lunch. And so 1:35 to 1:45 is your sodium. And I'm sorry, I have to correct something real quick. Sodium is 1:35 to 1:45. Think of Maggie loving to spend time in the ocean for 1.5 to 2.5 hours. Okay, that's. Let me scoot this back over. So magnesium is 1.5 to 2.5 hours. So Maggie loves to be in the ocean for 1.5 to 2.5 hours. All right. About 1:35, 1:45, she gets out of the ocean. All right. So about that time is when lunch happens in California, at least. So about 1:30 or 1:45, she comes out and she decides that she's going to take lunch. Now, she is really, her eyes are really bothering her from the amount of chloride in the ocean, and it makes it really hot. So it's about 96 to 106 degrees, and with that chlorine and the heat, makes it really hard for her and her contacts. So again, think chloride 96 to 106 for your chloride. All right, 96 to 106. So once she takes a break at 1:35 or 1:45 from the ocean, which is made of sodium, because the chlorine's bothering her with all the heat, which is 96 to 106, normal for a California day, she decides that she's going to drink milk. She drinks 8.6 to 10.2 liters of milk, which is tons of milk, but she's on a milk banana diet right now. It's a new thing. It's the new. She also eats 3.5 to 5 bananas. So milk, we're thinking calcium. We're thinking milk is, we have calcium in milk, and we drink 8.6 to 10.2 liters of calcium. And again, that goes back to your value of calcium. Now, bananas, most people relate bananas to potassium, and our potassium values there are 3.5 to 5. So she's eating anywhere between 3.5 and 5 bananas. Right now, she's really not trying to count it because it's all about making sure you have enough milk and bananas in your milk and banana diet. Then, after she eats lunch, she's sitting around waiting for her boyfriend, Foz. Remember, we're from California here, so we use all these crazy names. Foz is trying to get that shine off you. Foz is running late. He is supposed to be, here's Foz. All right. Foz is supposed to be here at 2:40, but instead he is 2 hours late, California time, and arrives at 4:40. So phosphate, think 2.4 to 4.4. All right. One more time. Let's recap. Mag, our girl who loves the ocean. All right. Again, magnesium loves the ocean so much that she spends an hour and a half to 2.5 hours in the ocean. All right. So Mg loves the ocean, spends 1.5 to 2.5 hours. At about 1:35 or 1:45, she takes a break from the sodium in the ocean because that chlorine is really bothering her eyes, especially since it's so hot outside because it's 96 to 106 degrees on a summer day. She decides to take a break and she drinks tons of milk, eats tons of bananas because she's on a banana milk diet. And she drinks 8.6 to 10.2 liters. She eats 3.5 to 5 bananas and waits on her boyfriend, Foz, who's running 2 hours late to count 2. He was supposed to be there at 2:40, and instead he comes at 4:40. That's almost dinner time for her. So at this point, she's ready for some more milk and bananas. But that's just one way of remembering your values. And again, there's a lot of values here to try and remember, but that's just one technique of remembering them. And if you think of something that works for you, by all means, let me know.